Hi, YouTube. This is the DMV Drex here with Arcane Kaze. He recently took top four at the PPG Win a Flight Case tournament, and he's here to show you his Blue Flare deck list. Arcane Kaze, you can take it away.
Cool, appreciate it. So this was the list I ran at that event. Shout out to the DMV Drake's team for helping me lab this, and special shout out to Reaper Games for, helping me lab out some of the Blue Flare stuff that we needed to do, to account for all of our matchups. And just to start things off with the eggs, pretty self-explanatory. Running the four of Wanyamon because I think it's the new best blue egg that we could run. In most decks, you're almost always going to have a blue Tamer out, so just being able to draw off of that is pretty easy to trigger. And we're running an extra Upamon egg because turn one, oftentimes people, just throw out Searcher rookies, and just being able to draw off of that as well is pretty good. And in addition, since this is Blue Flare, sometimes a match can get pretty grindy if you need to just keep stunning while you search for your pieces. So being able to not run out of eggs is important, and it also makes sure that you can always digivolve a rookie in raising for card draw. Speaking of, this is where things get a little different in terms of blue flare, because normally you would run like, four gals or like 4 to 3 Dracos and everything, but I opted to go 3-2 just for this meta. Three Dracomon because whenever you play another blue flare or Dramon, you get to draw one, and of course your main threats being Metal Gray and your level fives, you're gonna be playing them anyways. So getting the card advantage there is really good. And then the inheritable, you also get to gain a memory whenever you play one. So when you are set up and ready to go the next turn, you could extend your plays with the extra memory. And in addition, Gaussmon. So ideally, I would actually want to run, all four or three. But in testing, more often than not, since I actually went down to Blue Flare Champions, even just that slight shift it's like there's not enough in my hand usually whenever I start with Gaussmon, and so I opted for Draco instead just for the card advantage. And so whenever he would delete, I wouldn't always have a blue flare card to go into. Now that might be my own luck or whatever. So, I would always opt for 3 or 4, but just went 2 for now, just for that event. And the reason why we're so low on that is because of the floodgates. Now, as we all know, Black War Gray X is pretty much the best deck right now. And so Siakamon prevents Greymon X's Digivolution cost reduction. So oftentimes they would end up having to pass turn whenever they go into either the Metal Greymon or the Metal Gray X. And Siakamon has pretty much been a champion in those scenarios. And not just against that, but even the Gatomon cost reduction in Mastamon or the Grand Kuwagamon being cost reduced within Grandis. Like all of those things get shut down by Syakomon. And honestly, if I could, I would even maybe try going up 4 just because of how much Black War Grey X you're probably going to see at Nationals. But due to deck space, we're just going to go with 3 for now. And I still think Madoki Betamon is worth it because a lot of powerful decks are still running Memory Boost, and you can still hit X anybody out of security at 0 memory, and then give up your turn easily. So Madoki Betamon still excellent. It pretty much shuts down Bloom Lord because they can't get back their turn if Madoki Betamon's out. And it's also excellent against the Minerva Loop deck, as they need to actually gain the memory in order to keep the Cerberus Loop going. So onto the champions. Now, in my old build, I had 4 Greymon and 4 Decadramon and 4 Mailbird. Right now, I'm still at 4 Mailbird because we have no other Mailbirds to play until I believe BT13 or EX4, I believe. And because of that, we have to play all 4 here. However, the reason why I went 3-3 on the Greymon split is purely for the way I believe that Blue Flare can answer faster decks like Grandis or Melga. Uh, Normally, when it comes to let's take Grandis for instance. Normally, when it comes to Grandis, the way you could win is, hey, the deck loses to itself, so they brick, and then it buys you time for you to get off the ground. Or you end up sacking them in security because you can't really interact with Grandis. However, a new way I believe you should fight Gradius with Blue Flare is just by, winning faster than they can. You have the ability to cross with a Red Greymon just for 3 memory off of Metal Gray, and if you could just survive early checks and, push out with your rookie, swing 2 checks, and then go into more aggression that we'll go into later on, you can easily clear out security with the way you could build Blue Flare now. And so that's usually the game plan against them. And in order to make that happen, I need to see Red Greymon more so I can have the sec check. Because normally a lot of people will play around having 2 or more Digimon out. That's usually just the snap reaction in terms of playing against Blue Flare. However, this way, you actually don't need to rely on your opponent having 2 Digimon out in order to check an extra security card. Now, in terms of Decadramon, I went to 3 again because of deck space, but I still think that the Decadramon and Decagramon package is well more than worth running because one, the card draw, of course, you're gonna need, but number two, uh, Decagramon stuns without needing to rely on your opponent having 2 or more Digimon in play. So by Slide Digivolving for 2 over Metal Greymon, you could easily just stun any Digimon within this single stack meta, so long as you have a Decadramon within the sources. And then speaking of the fives, Metal Greymon, your main win condition, or at the very least, the main driving engine that leads you to it, being able to cross for 3 with Rush while stunning anything with 2 or fewer sources is pretty insane. And it's the very thing that enables you to be able to race decks like Grandis Mug or Blackboard Gray X. And then an interesting inclusion, Metal Greymon plus Cyber Launcher. This is a new card that's treated as Metal Gray and Cyber Dramon, and that's actually very important because number one, it has Armor Purge. So against the top decks that end up deleting you, this is a great layer of protection against that. But even more than that, I used to run the Jellymons in order to get rid of any like cross floodgates like Psychmon or Solarmon. Now, all you need to do is slight Digivolve over a Metal Greymon with this, and even if you don't slide anything under, you can still bounce level 3 to the bottom of your opponent's deck. Not to hand to the bottom of their deck. However, if you actually slide this under itself, you could also bottom deck a level 4. Now, an important thing about this is that it doesn't say instead. It's not a replacement effect. So a scenario could be you Slight Digivolve over Metal Gray, and let's say you're going against Cross or something, you could bottom deck a Shoutmon, and you could bottom deck, let's say, a Ballistamon or Darulamon, which is great. But the reason why I'm 50-50 on this card and I'm only running it at 2 is because oftentimes this could ruin your game plan as well, right? Even in the tournament itself for PPG, I was facing a War Grey X player, and I was in a situation where I needed the armor no matter what. And when I slide Digivolve because I didn't have a Decker Gray in hand, but rather a Cyber Launcher, my opponent, they had a War Grey X out and an Agumon. And I was like, oh, well, this is perfect. They have 2 things out. But I was actually forced to bottom the Agumon because the bottom decking is not optional. That's you. The sliding something under is optional, of course, but not the bottom decking. And it kind of just ruined the plan I had in mind, and I ended up losing that game. So this is a pretty polarizing card for Blue Flare, but I still think it's worth running at 2 because we're also running Metal Gray X, and this Digivolves for 0 over any Metal Greymon. Now, this is considered a Metal Greymon, so a good line you could do is if you think you might die in security with the 8k DP from Metal Gray, you can, if you have the memory, slight Digivolve into Cyber Launcher to make sure that you can swing with 2 checks and be protected with Armor Purge. And then, if you plan on going into Z Greymon, you could first Digivolve Metal Gray X over it for free, and then go into Z for 3 memory. You'll still get the security attack, and of course, because you have Metal Gray in the sources, you'll also get the DP boost. And of course, you could do that if you could just do that beforehand if you think that it's safe enough to swing with 11k DP. We already talked about Decker Greymon. I think this alongside Cyber Launcher having Armor Purge is excellent against Blackboard Grey X and Grandis because, I mean, when they do what they need to do in order to delete you, you have that layer of protection. And it really does go a long way when you're trying to outlast those decks, and you can't race them in time. For the top end, we have Z Greymon. So this is one of the new finishers Blue Flare receives. It could Digivolve over any level 5 for 3, but 2 over a Metal Greymon. So when it Digivolves, you can unsuspend this Digimon. So if you did the swing that I talked about earlier, he can unsuspend himself and be ready to swing for more checks. However, if so long as you have Blue Flare in its traits, of course, and your opponent has 2 or more Digimon out, you can actually gain the memory back and then just continue the aggression from there. In addition, he also gets you a blue Greymon and blue Mailbird from your trash under one of your tamers the moment he dies, and he material saves himself. So it's very difficult to get rid of this if you also can't get rid of the tamers. Now, that's just the aggressive side of him. Defensively, he can provide blocker for anything. So when Decker Gray or Cyber Launcher slides, gives you the option to slide a blue flare card underneath it, you can actually opt to slide Z Gray underneath if you need the blocker. Combine that with Armor Purge, and you're pretty much good to go. And then finally, once all the checks are said and done, I just teched in one Blitz Omni because there's a lot of scenarios where I end up just going through security and then, you're just sitting there with a suspended Z Gray. And, so long as you have Blitz Omni, you actually just swing for game. And in this meta, it's very important to be able to close out games in any way you can. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely worth it running the Blitz Omni. For Tamers, of course, surprise, surprise, 4 of Kiriha. I'm pretty sure no one saw this coming. He has the General Blue Flare traits, so he's searchable off of Blazing, and you could also play him for free off of it. And he pretty much does what the deck needs to do in terms of being able to cross from Tamers. However, the supporting Tamer, I think, is the main discussion for Tamers in Blue Flare right now. I went with the Trio Tamer because I tried to weigh my options between this and Sora and Joe, and for most matchups generally across the board, it seems like Sora Joe was just a better option. However, for all of the points that the Trio Tamer scored for that assessment for me, I believe that this Tamer actually worked better for the losing matchups because if it gets hit out of security or if you get to play it early, not only do you get the memory, but you also just get to draw a card. And I think this is very important for being able to find your pieces to be able to race, like I said. In addition, this is kind of just like a second Kyria. It allows you to digicross from tamer sources, and having 5 tamers that essentially do that is pretty good, especially since tamers are more vulnerable now. For the options, uh, just like in EX3, I'm going with 3 Blazing Memory Boost. Amazing card. A lot of people say it's the best memory boost for a good reason. However, I think running 4 is a bit excessive because normally you're only playing it once, and then it's probably getting hit out of security or something. But usually after that, it does its job, and you only really play it a second time in emergency situations. So I really don't want to see this card too often in my hand when I'd rather be seeing the pieces that I need to cross with. And then we have 2 Sorai and then 1 Cocytus Breath. Um, this was really important because remember earlier how I said that when it comes to matchups such as Grandis or Melga, one of the other few ways is that if they don't lose themselves or if you can't beat them by racing them, you have to be able to have those options in your deck that actually make them, worried about swinging into security in the first place. Against Melga in particular, Cocytus Breath is amazing because while they do have battle protection, unlike the Greymon X line, they do not have protection against leaving the battlefield. So bouncing this sets them back quite well. And then for Sorai, if they're swinging with Where Guru X, Sorai gets rid of that extra sec check from the promo Garurumon, and it gets rid of their battle protection. In addition, against Grandis, if they're swinging and they hit this, you get rid of their sources, provided they're not running X antibody, which most lists aren't, from what I'm seeing, and they can't restand because they don't have Grand Kuagamon in their stack anymore. And if they just have a rookie out that they just had there, expecting to go for game, well, they can't do that either. They have to pass turn by Digivolving over instead, thanks to Sarai. And last thing about Sarai, once the option protection from Black War Gray X leaves, you could also get rid of their sources that end up trashing your security when they unsuspend, as well as the ability to swing into your unsuspended Digimon. So that's always good as well. Now, in terms of Hammer Spark, uh, I know that at the beginning of this video I shout out Reaper Games. Just shouting him out again because watching some of his matches in tournament against Black War Grey X, using Hammer Spark to be able to extend the plays to finish out games was actually very important. I mentioned earlier that Z Gray can Digivolve for 3 over any other level 5, and when you need to swing with Metal Gray X first and you can't really have the luxury of digivolving for two into Z Gray, having the Hammer Spark beforehand is actually really good to make sure that you can always digivolve into him, just continue swinging. The only reason why I decided to go with one was because I only really want to see it for those situations, of course. But number two, deck space is also pretty tight here. Now, closing out the options, you're going to see something a little peculiar. Of course, there's one of Icewall, nothing strange about that. But Death Exmon, in this deck, I don't even count him as a Digimon. To be completely honest, I count him as a board wipe option. Against Black War Gray X, if they're swinging at security with 13 to 15k, this actually ends up deleting them, as fighting Black War Gray X is one of the few ways to actually delete them, or at least consistently. And then on top of that, it's 15k DP. If you actually manage to drop this on board against Black War Gray X, what are they redirecting? I mean, Zeeg is at 11, and with the bonus from Metal Gray X goes up to 14. And Black War Gray X can only really redirect the things that have the highest DP. So the rest of your deck is safe to swing, and if you stun Black War Gray X, they can't block either. So you could get all your checks in safely. So this is an excellent mid to late game option against that deck, especially because they're going to be playing Cool Boys, they're going to be playing Yuya, and when they feel safe enough to play another Digimon, that's where Death X can definitely take over the game from there. And that is pretty much the list that I used to get top four at the PPG win a Flight to Nats tourney.
All right, thank you, Arcane Kaze, for your deck list. I'm glad to see that you're taking the same deck that you won Store Champion with and working on improving it. Quick question though, was there any like particular matchups that you feel like this deck struggles with, and what techs would you play to get around them?
Yeah, so the main decks that this deck struggles with are most of the ones that I mentioned. So number one being Black War Gray X. I know a lot of people pretty much believe that the introduction of that deck pretty much makes Blue Flare unplayable. However, I think the way you get around it is, of course, like I mentioned, you race them, try to get as much security down as possible and end the game before they're set up, because most of the bad matchups Blue Flare has are decks that usually want, one or two turns of searching first. So Grandis usually needs to find their pieces in order to get into their perfect stack to OTKU. Melga usually needs the battle protection and everything before they have that level 5 and raising, and then they push out and start swinging. And then Black Warrior X, they also need to set up. So that's one way. Another, definitely relying on Decker Gray's Armor Purge. A lot of those decks usually, other than Melga, can't really delete you if you stack like one or two of these, because it's like Digivolves over any level 5, so they could even go over themselves. So even if you hit a Hades Force Insecurity with this, I mean, there could easily just be a Cyber Launcher underneath, for instance. And so in terms of being able to either push for aggression or, go pretty, controlly with the deck, being able to balance and time those pivots, I think, is pretty key in order to beat Blue Flare's most worst matchups. Now, uh, I think on that note, Blue Flare also has winning matchups on paper, such as Bloom Lord and Minerva Loop, because they just put out so many Digimon. However, you do need to keep in mind that those matchups, while they win on paper, are not free. So you definitely need to be able to time the crosses well against those matchups, and this is where Badoki Betamon comes into play also.
All right, thank you. This is the DMV Drake signing off, and once again, thank you, Arcane Kaze, for your top four finish.
Oh yeah, not a problem. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and also check out our Discord in the link below.
Thank you.